As an independent curator and researcher of the interdisciplinary kind, she has collaborated with and held positions at a range of institutions, including the Documenta Archive in Kassel, the Museo Reina Sofia Madrid, La Fuente Archives, Santander again, Deutsches Historisches Museum in Berlin, and the Universidad de las Artes in Guayaquil, Ecuador. For her most recent show, No Order, No Neatness, Books and Magazines from the 1980s, is currently on view in Musac in León, Spain, and is going to be on view till June this year. She has had several different positions in Contemporary Art Museum, among others at the MAGBA in Barcelona. And from the very important, vital discussions over dinner, some of us already know that she has also lived in China, and she currently is based in Hamburg. The title of her paper today is Constructive Contact Between Us, Other Books, and so by Ulises Carrión. So in that sense, you are going to a bit continue some of the themes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. And I have the good news that I'm going to talk for 10 minutes, I think, at the most. I've been like making my presentation shorter and shorter as the encounter was moving on, because it's really like breathing on my neck, this pressure of the 20 minutes. So I hope I won't hold you for long. I also haven't written any essay in the sense of like a piece of theory with conclusions. I've done something else. I've gathered a lot of images that I want to share with you today. I'm going to tell you the story of Ulises Carrión and his bookshop. And then I want to tell you another story that has to do with Ulises Carrión's archive and with Hungary and with different things. But it's going to be a little different to the other presentations that we've had today. Sorry, thank you also for letting me sneak into your panel in this wild way. So, Ulises Carrión was born in the Mexican town of San Andrés de Tuxtla in the state of Veracruz in 1941. After studying literature in Mexico and England, in the early 70s, he settled in Amsterdam, where he lived until his death in 1989. Ulises Carrión's work as a writer and artist expands across different media: literature, theoretical writings, interviews, criticism, essays, notes, translations, poetry, narrative, what he called bookworks, projects, drawings, language performances, which combined experimental poetry, sound art, and conceptual theater, and videos and films. His work spans a period of 24 years of production, from his early experiences with writing to his role as a publisher and archivist in the last years. So Ulises Carrión began his creative practice as a writer, as a fiction writer. He wrote two novels. One of them is entitled La Muerte de Miss O, and the other one is entitled De Alemania. This is the one that you see here. And he was at the beginning of what was considered by many a very promising literary career when he decided to leave Mexico and give up fiction writing in the classical sense. So then he studied in France, in Germany, and in England, and in 1970 he settles definitely in Amsterdam, and it's in Amsterdam where he starts working with experimental poetry and then moves on to various other forms of art. Many of his works, regardless of their format, share an underlying interest in exploring every kind of sign system or communication system. This is a poster of one of his sound performances. He was also doing a lot of sound works, and he designed the posters for many of the things for many of the activities which he programmed or in which he took place. In this one, the image kind of connects with one of his very many different interests. He was very, very interested in boxing for different reasons. So that was also, combined with opera and many like cooking and many other different things that were not directly connected to art. And this is a photograph of one of his performances that he gave in the Apple. In this case, what he did was to set to analyze rumor and gossip as communication strategies with a given structure. So he drew diagrams which explained how rumor communicates or expands within a given group of people, how gossip communicates in a different way from rumor, etc. And this is the poster of one of the few, I mean, he did some films, but not so many. This is one of them, The Death of the Art Dealer, which had him as a main character. And this is one of his videos, probably, I mean, one of the best known ones. It's entitled A Book, and what it tells is like the deconstruction and the reconstruction of the book as a physical format in a way. As you see, there are two persons. We only see their hands in the video. One of them, the one on the right, is kind of ripping off the pages of the book and completely destroying it. And then the person on the left is taking up these pages, these ripped off pages, and trying to make them flat again. And then in the end, in the very last images of the video, he kind of binds them again with the cover that has just been kind of destroyed. And there's a new object, a new kind of book with a different form to the classical one. This is what Ulises did this video is important because it shows what he did or attempted to do in many other ways and in many other different formats. And this is another piece that you may have seen. This is one of the most well-known pieces by Ulises. These are two sheets where you read the text, "Dear reader, don't read." And that was also another trait of his practice. He insisted on stressing the aspects of books and written communication systems which didn't have to do with the content of the text. Like he wanted to detach books and printed matter from their content and just be functional in terms of their form. And this is one of the works in which he kind of encapsulates this kind of thought. In 1975, Ulises Carrión wrote the essay The New Art of Making Books, which you may have heard of. It's nowadays considered one of the seminal texts in the genre of artist books. And in this essay, he develops his conception of a new form of art, which goes beyond the sheer writing of a text, so as to include every formal aspect of the book as part of the creative task of the writer. A piece which is produced in this way is what Ulises Carrión calls a book work. And this is a term that he kind of invented. Ulises Carrión himself was the author of many book works. Some of them were unique copies, some others were published in modest print runs, but he also started collecting book works and artist publications in general that had been made by other friend artists first, and then by artists at large. This interest and this collection became the seed of one of his most personal projects, which was the bookshop Other Books and So. This is one of the, I just show you one example because it would be very long to kind of tackle the book works that Ulises Carrión did. This is just one of them, so that you see one of the covers. But they are all very different. Upon his arrival in Amsterdam in 1972, Carrión had founded, together with other artists, an alternative art space called In-Out Center, which only existed for 2 years until 1974. In 1975, he opened his own space, the Other Books and So bookshop, which would run until 1979. Other Books and So included a selection of artist books and book works, many dispatches of mail art, multiples, magazines, and other art formats, which in general were still, and are still up to some extent, on the margins of what is considered high art. And this is one of the postcards, or one of the cards that he designed so as to make the bookshop known, and I would like to read the text on the right, because this is more or less, this also encapsulates in a different form the idea of Ulises Carrión about what books could be. Other Books and So was a space for exhibition and distribution of other books, non-books, anti-books, pseudo-books, quasi-books, concrete books, visual books, conceptual books, structural books, project books, statements books, instructions books, and musical scores, postcards, posters, objects, and sound poetry. The bookshop quickly became the center for a very wide mail art and artist network, which Ulises often referred to, in particular talking about the mail art network, he referred to it as the big monster. And this network included connections with artists in Latin America, in Western Europe, and also in Central and Eastern Europe. Of course, given his background, he had a lot of connections with artists from Latin America. Then he started getting connected in Europe as a whole. So he became kind of a really, international figure within the context of mail art networks. This is just, I have a couple of images so that you see what the bookstore was like, for you to get a glimpse of it. This is him. and this is also him. And the bookshop worked also as an event place. He programmed like many different types of activities, performances and talks and discussions, but also exhibitions of many different things, like his own works, but also other works. This is the invitation card to one of these exhibitions, entitled, as you can see, Newspaper Art and Art Newspapers. There were also like solo exhibitions of artists where their printed matter or their kind of artist publications were shown. This is the one with materials by Dorothy Janone. And this is the exhibition this is the poster for a lecture performance that did not happen at Other Books and So, but it's important because it's one of the activities that he did like in terms of communicating and disseminating the content of this vast mail art network that he had kind of become the center of. But besides all of these activities and besides running the bookstore and the network, he was also a publisher, and he published books and printed matter by other people, but he also published a magazine, several of them actually. This is the one that I wanted to talk to you about. Between 1977 and 1978, Carrión, together with Art van Berneveld and Salvador Flores, published the magazine Ephemera, which was a photocopied periodical which included selections of mail art and stamp artworks that he had gathered through his mail art activities. This is the cover of the first one. This is the cover of the 11th one. It was the one before the last in 1978. And this issue of Ephemera was devoted to Hungary. Its contents had been selected by György Galantai, and it was in fact through Julian Galantai that the Hungarian art scene got connected to the international artist network that Ulises had set up. Through their contact, Hungarian András Ban, and I beg your pardon for the pronunciation because it's probably very wrong, but you will see his name later on, he got to know Other Books and So and Ulises Carrión through the help of Julia and Galantai, and it was he who helped organize an exhibition of Ulises' work in Budapest. Other Books and So was a very lively bookshop and also an extremely relevant spot in terms of artist networks and mail art connections, but it was a commercial disaster. So in 1971, Ulises had to take the decision to shut the bookshop down. After closing down the bookshop, he found himself in possession of a very substantial collection of artist publications of every possible kind, which he decided to transform into the Other Books and So archive. The Other Books and So archive became the final recipient of the various materials that Carrión's activities gradually put together, thanks to his constant exchanges with artists as well as to his own artistic and organizational activities. This archive was first hosted in the former bookshop, then in a second location, and it was eventually moved to Ulises and Art van der Verneveld's home. This is what the archive looked like. Writing about his archive, writing about what was the idea behind the archive and how he had conceived it, Ulises Carrión said, and I quote, "The archive is also a product of a theoretical development of mine, which is that I have come to realize more and more clearly that my idea of art does not restrict itself to the making of objects or to events. I try to admit all non-aesthetic elements into my work so that you can see the difference between a traditional book and an artist's book. A traditional book is made by different people. One man is responsible for the entire production of an artist's book, for the content, for the form, for everything. You can also compare that with art. In traditional art, you have a great number of specialized people, the artist, the gallery owner, the art critic, and so forth, while here, the artist is responsible for all of these elements. For me, an archive is an attempt to realize that in reality, for I consider an archive to be an artwork, but it is an artwork that implies space, a public institution. It implies the work of other people, my social function. It has no limit in time, for the archive can survive indefinitely. It also has no limits. It grows steadily. It is still alive." So this is what he thought about the archive, but Ulises Carrión died quite young. He died when he was 49, when he kind of was beginning to consider or to work with his collection of printed matter as an archive, he died of AIDS. And then shortly afterwards, his longtime companion also died of AIDS. And so the fate of the archive was a little different to other instances such as Artpool, where there has been a continuity for many years. In the case of Ulises, what happened was that, it depends on with whom you talk, they recount the story differently, but he had a big group of friends around him, and there were basically two positions among Ulises' friends. There were the ones that wanted the archive to be preserved as such and to be maybe taken to an institution, maybe not, but in any case not kind of split into different parts. And there were the others who were few who wanted to follow literally the Ulises' last will, which was explicitly not to keep it as a unity, but rather to dismantle it and kind of send it into the world again in pieces. The thing is that the ones that had this second opinion were the ones that got the archive when Ulises died. So the archive went into private hands. It was a friend artist of his that sort of took the archive with him to his home in Switzerland. And then the archive of Ulises Carrión kind of became a legend because it has been kind of appearing here and there in pieces all over the years in the market. 5 minutes, okay, thank you. So there is no more the entity of Ulises Carrión archive, but rather only bits and pieces. And there have been some collectors, in particular one collector in Spain, who have been very keen on getting hold of all of the pieces that he could along the years. And this collector, is José María Lafuente, who has put together the Archivo Lafuente in the north of Spain, which is a huge collection of artists' archives and printed matter from artists and artist documentation related to the 20th century. And what I'm going to show you now is a selection of some of the materials that are kept in the Lafuente archive in relation to Hungary. When I was preparing this presentation, I spoke to the archive, to Lafuente archive, and I requested them to send me some of the things that they have from Hungarian artists. And I became a load of information, which I, who am not an expert in Hungarian art, can hardly decipher. And it's also an interesting exercise to see how this kind of resonates with issues like historicization, but also contextualization and decontextualization and interpretation of archival materials. Like nowadays, these materials are completely off the area where they were kind of created and they had some sense. So what do we do when we don't have an idea of that context when we are faced with them? I'll just show you some of them. I won't comment much. I have, in most cases, explicitly not given captions because the information that we have is, or the information that is kept in the archive is pretty incomplete. But I thought you would like to see these materials and then we can, maybe together come to some sort of conclusion. I don't know if you see, do you read the text a little bit? Some of the letters are really beautiful in form. I mean, regardless of what they say, they are really beautiful documents. It's also interesting to see how Ulises, the notes in a different handwriting that you see very often are notes that Ulises made, like saying, okay, I already sent the money, or answered, sending back the books and paying the money, or requesting more books, or whatever. So through the correspondence, together with his notes, you can follow up how the relationship was between these persons. This is the one where he lets Ulises know that he's had twins. And this is a funny one, which is absolutely impossible to understand from my point of view. Thanks for your whatever, I don't know. I think, thanks for your reply. I think you have a too high opinion of me. Otherwise, some years ago, I've written about Beethoven that Goethe was a fucking something, but Beethoven was stone deaf. Regards. I am trying to realize another self of mine. Maybe it could be interesting, who knows? These are some of the postcards and envelopes. This is another one of the artists that had a lot of correspondence with him in those years. This is funny. This is written in French and signed as Franz Kafka. This is written in Hungarian, so I have no idea what the letter is about. And this is the one where I took the quote for the title of my text, because he says, "Thank you for your permanent interest shown against my works and for your help in the realization of a constructive contact between us," which I think was really a key point for many of the artists who were involved in the network, no? Like being not necessarily in the big centers where art was kind of being developed. Many of them show in their letters how happy they are that they can be connected through mail art with the sea. This is, I think you laugh, but it's him, right? This is, I have no idea what this is, but this is also in the files. This is another one. So there are, this is just a sample. This is a random sample. I have to finish. Yeah, I'm done. No, I know. This is the one before the last. I just wanted to let you know that there are also correspondence folders with these other people, probably with some more. There's not such a deep knowledge of the Hungarian or East European art scene in the archive, so that we can know that everything is ordered correspondingly to their countries. But what I wanted to say, there are many things that I would like to say about this, and as I said, it raises a lot of questions in my head, also resounding with words that I have heard here, like in your previous talks, like cross-fertilization or archive phobia and archive philia, etc., that it would be very interesting to discuss, but we don't have time. I just wanted to kindly invite you to come to Spain and research these things, because we're not so sure what they are, and it would be very helpful to have help from the experts. Thank you. Thank you very much.